Welcome to Real Paranormal Activity, the network. Entertainment you'll enjoy.
You are listening to an RPA production where people gather. Vase Corporation, LLC.
I always felt that if I shared the story with my friends, they would figure I'm a little gone. I didn't want to share it. Well, here we are, 1955, Brooklyn, New York. I had entered a contest and wrote a composition at 9 years old, and miracles will never cease. I won. I won 3 weeks in this faraway exotic land called Connecticut to a very high-priced, rich, spoiled kids camp. Might as well have said, "You're going to Mars." The bus ride there was just an odyssey, a voyage to the unknown. Arriving at camp, first thing I remember seeing was a group of boys that seemed to know their way around better than most. I was kind of eyeing them to say, "Hey, take me into the group." I told them I wanted to be part of your gang. That's when they told me there's an initiation. The little wise guys, tough guys, the upstarts, were going to induct me into their group if I could climb this tree. If anybody who can do that tree is entitled to be in the group. This particular tree also was off limits to the camp, so there was a double dare going on. It was a pretty rigid rule. Don't go off the campgrounds. We had to crawl through a hole of a fence to get out on the other side. Then as we came to the tree, compared to an apartment building, it was the top floor, which is 5 stories up. I was getting a bit anxious about everything because I was lugging a larger and chubbier butt than the rest of the kids. I had a handicap, to say the least. One boy who was being inducted before me went up, and he went as high as you possibly can go, got down. That's when I thought I could lift my butt up there. I wanted to impress the guys, so I was going at a pace I probably should not have. And I'm doing real well, I thought. Practically to the top of the tree. And suddenly I stepped on a limb that broke. I grabbed back on the tree and realized there's nothing I can do. I was so far on top that I could feel swaying, and now I am terrified.
Guys, help! Ah! Help!
They had a great laugh. I am begging these guys to do something to help me, and they promised, "Yeah, we're going to go get help. We'll come back with a ladder."
We'll get you help, all right?
I didn't trust them, but I had no choice. What I really thought was going to happen was a strong gust of wind was going to come along and break me completely off the tree. I needed a fireman with a ladder. But instead came this wonderful lady. Suddenly I hear a lady's voice speak to me in a language that I recognize because of my mother, Yiddish. And I looked over, and there she was. And I don't even know where she came from, and I didn't care. I was too frightened. Her first call to me was the word boychik. Boychik is an affectionate term for boy. And she was giving me instructions as to what to do. Telling me to wrap myself around the tree so that I could slide down far enough so that she could grab me. So I'm there, sliding down this tree. I was holding on so tightly. I got to see some blood come out of my hands. And I finally came down, and I noticed this kerchief that was called a babushka, and a star of David around her neck with a green emerald in the middle of the star. And then she turned me around, gave me instructions on how to go back. And I do not remember ever turning around to see her. I finally found my way back to the camp. There was the kids eating some ice cream, telling me, oh, we were just about to get to the counselor just now. I really wanted to knock their heads off. I was enraged. What rotten kids they were, and what a newbie I was. It didn't take too long for me to find out I wasn't really equipped for any of it. I just wanted to get out of there, to go back to the city. Camp was over after 3 weeks, got home, never mentioned anything about it because I had broken the rules, so I didn't want to talk to my mother about it. Our next door neighbor, who was in photography, offered to my mother to refurbish some of her photographs she had bought from her home, Bucharest. She had them and was going through them, and suddenly I look at one, and I said, that's her. And my mother said, who? And I said, Mom, I got to tell you the story. And I proceeded to tell her the story of the lady who came and saved me. And she said, no, that's your grandmother who never left Romania. The picture was that woman, babushka and aprons included. I said she was wearing also this Jewish star. The expression on my mother's face went pale, and my mother just got up, brought back a kind of old little jewelry box, and took out this Star David, and I said, well, this is it. This was what she was wearing. She cried, is what she did, and said, I believe my mother's neshama, which means soul, neshama, came and saved you. There was just too much coincidence. So I believe it. I believe it.
Don't call Hi, this is Don.
And this is Lainey.
And we're Spectre Waves Paranormal, and we love listening to Aaron Hunter on Real Paranormal Activity Podcast.
All of this is time.
Welcome. I'm Aaron Hunter, purveyor of paranormal stories, the occult, and the unexplained. Welcome to RPA. I hope you enjoy your stay. Hey guys, Aaron here, and it is Monday, March 25th, 2024, episode 317. How's everyone out there around the world doing? And as always, glad to be back in the hot seat. Announcements. There will not be a new episode of Aaron's Horror Show for tomorrow, Tuesday. His writing career is taking off. He's trying to keep up. He's very busy. I'm happy for him. He'll be back as soon as, time allows him. And there will not be a new Terry's Mysterious Moments for this Wednesday. He's having some trouble recording. Don't know what it is, but he's working on it. But this Thursday, a new episode of Strange Reality with Dave Emmons will be released. And also, as usual, this Friday, 2 new entertaining short films. Other than that, everything's going pretty smooth. Yeah. The weather's kind of wonky over here. It's a little bit warmer now, in the 50s, but it's rainy. And, of course, some parts of the states over here on the East Coast, a lot of winter storms. Still. But we're going to do more listener stories, as always. So let's get the show on the road, and you guys know what that means. Oh, yeah, man. Come on. Say it with me. Say it with me. That's right. 2. The story then. Follow me right this way. No pushing, no shoving, and the fires are still going nice and toasty in here. You guys know the deal. Grab a beanbag over there in the corner, find an empty spot on the floor, and as always, while you guys are doing that, I'm going to get behind my desk here, and I print out Britt's packet and see what stories she has chosen for us. Oh, okay. We have 3 medium ones. All right. Let me take a sip of my green tea real quick. Oh, man. So good when it hits the lips. All right. The first one. This one is by Mandy, and it's titled Dolls Moving and Midnight Whistles. Okay, Mandy. See what you got, man. These experiences happened when my daughter and I lived alone in an old house owned by a friend of my mother. Sarah wasn't much more than a toddler, and I was heavily pregnant with my son. His father and I were technically together, but we were still living separately until we could find a place to suit us. Sarah and I slept in the biggest bedroom, me with my bed and her in her crib. That room stayed cold. So cold, I asked my dad to check the heating. It had an ancient heating system, but he found nothing wrong. So I blamed it on the huge windows in the room. After a couple weeks, Sarah started screaming whenever she was left in that room alone, and so we slept on the couch together. Well, the next development was whenever I got up in the mornings, the bedroom door would be locked from the inside. I started keeping a butter knife on hand to pick the extremely old lock whenever I needed in the room. Apparently, after these tricks got no response from me, it resorted to messing with my daughter's porcelain doll collection. My aunt loves flea markets, and Sarah had a large collection of antique dolls arranged on a built-in shelf in that bedroom. Every morning, after picking the lock to gain entrance to my own bedroom, the dolls would be rearranged and turned to face the wall. Okay, no big deal. It's just irritating, so I continued to ignore it. Another notable experience while living there was one night I got up to pee. Not unusual considering I was pregnant and peed on average once an hour. The bathroom and the dining room share a wall, so I was sitting there half awake and suddenly heard whistling clearly from the dining room. About the time I registered the whistling, it turned into a tune that I still can't quite place. It lasted long enough for me to be certain that, yes, I was fully awake by then, and yes, it was a tune before it stopped. We moved after my son's father and I found our own place, not because I was scared. It never bothered me and actually made life a bit more interesting. As for the history of the house, all I know is that my mom's friend's family bought the large amount of land it was part of, to build a new home and decided to rent out that little old house instead of tearing it down. It's still there, and I wonder if it's still occupied by my whistling friend. Thank you. And that was from Mandy. Oh man, I loved it. Mandy, thank you very much for sharing. It's a great story, and that's not unusual. You guys might be thinking, I'll be running out of there with the whole dolls situation and the locked door. But yeah, it doesn't bother her. And we've had quite a few stories in the past seasons where people actually like their haunted houses. It doesn't, like this story goes, it doesn't bother them, and they treat the house like it's a novelty, with these things going on. They actually like it. So, I get it. Yeah, Mandy, thank you again for sharing. All right, what do we got? What's next? This one is by Kathy, and it's titled The Weird Vase. Okay, Kathy, see what you got, man. My Aunt Lily had a passion for flea markets, yard sales, and especially estate sales. But let me tell you, one time, she brought something home she didn't expect. She bought a cardboard box from an estate auction full of odds and ends, and she found a strange-looking vase in it. It was ugly, maybe a foot tall, and it wasn't painted exactly. It kind of appeared to be stained, a brownish color like homemade dye. It has two handles on each side and is very unfinished. Its texture is rough, and it still has marks from a pottery wheel on the bottom, so it's obviously homemade. So, she placed her find in a glass curio cabinet along with her collection of other vases. But when my uncle sat at his computer desk, his back was facing squarely towards the cabinet. He got to where he hated that vase because he swore he could feel it looking at him, and he stayed covered in goosebumps while doing his online work. He finally put his foot down, and the vase traveled to my Aunt Shay's house up the road. Well, it didn't live there much longer because her son, a toddler at the time, was terrified of it, but was too young to explain exactly why. Next, it was sent to my parents' house until my dad threatened to smash it because his beloved Yorkie howled when the vase was brought near him. So, I was chosen as the next owner of that monstrosity of a vase. I put it in the living room foyer beside the front door on one of those triangular shelves that are made to fit into corners. Well, now my dog is being terrorized. He never goes to the front door to ask to go out anymore. He chooses another door, no matter how bad he has to go. I was watching him once while he was tossing one of his toys up in the air, and it landed dangerously close to the monster in the corner. I told him to get it, and he crept slowly sideways towards it, never taking his eyes off that vase, then snatched his toy and darted away with his tail between his legs. This was enough to get my aunt interested in finding out as much as possible about where it came from and so on. Turns out, the vase was an urn for human ashes. Now that we knew that, we took a closer look. Down inside the neck of it are distinct marks from where a cork had been in place. Of course, it's empty now, and we have no idea who it was and where those ashes are. Fast forward a few years later, and I still own the vase. It sits in the same spot I first placed it in. No one likes it, and my dog is still wary of it, but I refuse to get rid of it because my aunt that found it so fascinating passed away not long after from breast cancer. I can't bring myself to get rid of something she gave me. And besides, it's never bothered me a bit. So, it continues to reside in its corner. Thanks for reading. And that's from Kathy. Kathy, thank you very much for sharing. Great story. I loved it. Yeah, man. I personally like to go antiquing too, every once in a while. Because you just find stuff that are no longer being produced, or just very unique things like this. It's a homemade urn. But like this story says, you never know what you're bringing home. Yeah, we get a few stories like this. You buy something from an antique store or a thrift store, and You know, your house is peaceful. You live there for a number of years, but then all of a sudden, things just start happening. Yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, Kathy, thank you again. And what's next? What do we got? This one is by Susan, and it's titled Old Home. Okay, Susan, let's see what you got, man. We lived in Missouri for about 20 years when we decided to move to a small town right by the river. It was a very old town, and a lot of the buildings and homes were either falling down or being restored. We have a large family, 8 children. So when I found this beautiful old home for very reasonable rent, I took it. The home was built in the 1800s, and the garage used to be where they had a stable for the horses. There was a lot of the old charm, pocket doors, painting on the walls, 2 sets of stairs, butler's pantry, etc., etc. There was the main floor, the upstairs, a full attic, and a large basement. My son, who was 14 at the time, took the attic. It was creepy, but he loved it. I remember finding old newspapers under the old flooring from the 1900s. Articles on Hitler and ads for houses that cost $6,000. I really loved it there, for the most part. I felt a little uneasy, but I just chalked that up to the size of the home. I hated going into the basement to do laundry. You just had that uneasy feeling. To get into the basement, there was an old door with a glass window in it. I always kept it closed because of my youngest son. Things started to happen after a month or two. In the back of the house was a screened-in porch of sorts with shutter windows. I made sure to shut them tight, and every time I would leave and come back, they would be wide open. I finally stood in the room and asked whoever was in there with me, please stop opening them up. I don't mind them being there, just don't open the windows. Amazingly, it stopped. Then there was the door to the basement. Every evening around 9:30 to 10, you could hear the door slam. The door was already shut and everyone was in bed. This happened almost every night. That was not so bad. It was the attic that was the worst. My son would hear growling noises from the little cubby spots that led downstairs. The lights would flicker for no reason, and my son would say he would hear voices talking to him and calling his name. We only stayed there 6 months. It was just a little more than we could handle. I spent time researching the home, and it was built and lived in by a general of the Army, and was at one time a stop-off in the Underground Railroad. That explains all the little doors and hidden areas in the walls. I loved the house and didn't mind some of the spirits there, but whatever was in the attic could just stay there. Love RPA. That was from Susan. Susan, thank you very much for sharing. Oh man, I loved it. Sounds like a cool house though. I love those old homes. Yeah. And yeah, your 14-year-old son loved the attic until things started up. Yeah, that's whatever's up there. You know, they say whenever you hear growling, that's not a good sign, but it seems like you guys got out of there because it started bothering you. Yeah, you only stay there for 6 months. It's too bad. Yeah, Susan, thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, that's a good story. I would probably leave too. Or either that, I mean, if you have a following some sort of faith, go talk to your leadership and get the house blessed or something, see what happens. And so that's it. Yeah, short and sweet. Love the stories. And for you new people, if you have your own experiences, merely send it to me, Aaron, Aaron, at realparanormalactivity.com, and I'll read it off on a future episode for the world to hear. And with that, short and sweet, I'm calling it. The show's been produced by myself and Britt, and it's also made possible by LaFosse Corporation. And man, we love you guys. Oh yeah, we do. As always, thank you and good night.